The warning lights flashed red across the orbital station as Captain Jake Morrison rushed to the command center. His boots echoed through the metal corridors as he moved. Something big was happening. The sensors had picked up a ship approaching. Earth, not a human ship, something else. "Sir, we have contact," Lieutenant Danny Cooper called out from his station. "Unknown vessel requesting permission to dock. They're broadcasting on frequencies we've never heard before." Jake looked at the main screen. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen. It looked like it was made of crystal and metal mixed together. Parts of it seemed to glow with soft blue light. But the ship was damaged. Scorch marks covered its hull and one wing was almost completely gone. "Are they armed?" Jake asked. "I don't think so, sir. The ship barely has power." "It looks like they've been through a war," Jake made his decision. "Grant them permission to dock, but keep our weapons ready. Alert Dr. Lisa Hamilton. If these are aliens, we'll need her." Dr. Lisa Hamilton was Earth's best expert on alien life. She had spent years working on ways to communicate with other species, even though humans had never met any. Her laboratory was filled with computers and translation equipment that most people didn't understand. When Jake's message reached her, Lisa dropped everything and ran to the docking bay. Her heart was racing. This was the moment she had prepared for her whole life. First contact with an alien species, the alien ship docked with a soft hiss. Lisa watched through the safety glass as the airlock opened. What came out was not what she expected. The creature was tall and thin, about 8 feet high. Its skin looked like living crystal that changed colors as it moved. It had 4 arms and moved with grace that seemed impossible. Behind it came 3 more beings, all looking the same, but with different colored crystal skin. "I am Ambassador Kethvel of the Zephyrian Collective," the first alien said. Its voice came from a small device on its chest. The words were in perfect English. "We come seeking help from the people of Earth." Lisa stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly. "I am Dr. Lisa Hamilton. Welcome to Earth. How do you know our language? We have watched your species for many cycles. We know your languages, your customs, your history. We have always known you existed, but we never made contact." Kethvel's crystal skin flickered between blue and green. "We wish we had done so sooner." Jake joined them, along with Admiral Ben Carter, who had arrived quickly after hearing the news. Admiral Carter was a tough man who had served in many wars on Earth. He looked at the aliens with suspicion. "Why come to us now?" Admiral Carter asked, "And why do you need help?" Ambassador Kethvel's skin turned darker. "Because we are dying. My people and 5 other species in our region of space are under attack. We have lost 12 worlds in the past 10 years. Billions of lives have been lost," Lisa gasped. "Who is attacking you?" "The Vorthan Empire. They are a species that consumes entire worlds. They take all resources and enslave or kill all life they find. They have been expanding across the galaxy for over a century." The aliens led the humans to a conference room where they activated a holographic display. The images that appeared made everyone in the room feel sick. Cities burning, people running in terror, entire planets stripped bare of life. "This is what the Vorthans do," Kethvel explained. "They arrive with massive fleets and demand surrender. Those who resist are killed. Those who surrender become slaves. When they finish with a world, nothing remains alive." Admiral Carter leaned forward. "How many worlds have they taken?" "Over 300 in the past century. They are unstoppable. No military force has ever been able to defeat them." "Then why come to us?" Jake asked. "Earth barely has space travel. We've never fought in space." The alien's skin flickered again. "Because you are Deathworlders." The room fell silent. Lisa spoke first. "What does that mean?" "Your planet Earth is what we call a death world. Most species in the galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds with few dangers. Worlds with plenty of food, gentle weather, and no large predators. Your world is different." Kethvel activated another display. This one showed Earth from space, then images of Earth's history. Volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, ice ages, and wars. Your species survived ice ages that would kill most galactic life. You lived through volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and diseases that destroyed most life on your planet. You evolved alongside predators that could kill you easily. Your own species has fought constant wars for thousands of years. The alien paused, letting the words sink in. What scares us about humans is what we need now. You are the only species we know that has the ability to fight against impossible odds. You are the only ones who might be able to stop the Vorthons. Admiral Carter stood up. You're asking us to fight a war against an empire that has conquered 300 worlds. With what? We have maybe 100 ships that can leave our solar system. We can provide technology, Kethvel replied. Advanced weapons, faster ships, stronger defenses. We can teach you about space warfare. But we need your tactics, your warriors, your willingness to fight when others would surrender. Lisa looked at the images still playing on the holographic display. Children being taken from their families, entire cities reduced to ash. How long do we have? Our intelligence says the Vorthons are preparing for their final assault. They want to eliminate all resistance in our region. Once they finish with us, they will look for new territories to conquer. Eventually, they will find Earth. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Carter spoke. We need to discuss this with our governments. This is not a decision we can make alone. We understand, Kethvel said. But please understand our urgency. Every day we delay, more people die, more worlds fall. After the aliens left for temporary quarters, the human leaders gathered in private. Admiral Carter paced the room while Jake and Lisa sat at the table. This is insane, Carter said. We're talking about fighting an interstellar war. We don't even have proper space marines. But they're right about one thing, Lisa said. If this Vorthon Empire is really expanding, they'll reach Earth eventually. It's better to fight them now with allies than alone later? Jake nodded. And from what I saw in those images, these people need help. Real help. How can we turn away from that? Admiral Carter stopped pacing. You know what will happen if we agree, don't you? Every military unit on Earth will want to volunteer. Our people won't be able to resist a fight like this. It's in our nature. Maybe that's exactly what's needed, Lisa said softly. Maybe our nature is what will save them. Carter looked out the window at Earth below. I'll present this to the World Council, but I already know what they'll say. Humanity has never backed down from a fight when innocent people need help. As the meeting ended, emergency communications were already being sent to every major government. On Earth, the message was simple but shocking. Aliens had come to Earth asking for help in a war. The response would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the fate of an entire region of the galaxy. In his quarters, Ambassador Kethvel looked out at the blue and green planet below. He had studied humans for decades, watching their wars, their struggles, their triumphs. He knew they were dangerous. But he also knew they were the galaxy's only hope. The death world was about to awaken. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. Despite all attempts to keep it secret, word leaked out within hours. Aliens had come to Earth asking for help in a war. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Military recruitment offices in every country saw lines stretching around city blocks. Young men and women who had never thought about joining the military suddenly wanted to fight for strangers they had never met. The idea of defending innocent people against a cruel empire touched something deep in human nature. Colonel Ryan Brooks stood in his office at the Pentagon, watching the crowds outside through his window. His phone had been ringing nonstop since the news broke. Every military commander in the world wanted to know what was happening. Sir, we have a problem, his aide, Lieutenant Kelly Davis, said as she entered the office. We've received over 50,000 applications for the expeditionary force in the past 6 hours. The system is completely overwhelmed. Ryan turned from the window. Kelly was one of the toughest soldiers he had ever met. She had survived 3 tours in the worst war zones on Earth. If anyone could handle this situation, it was her. What kind of people are applying? Ryan asked. Everyone, sir. Active military, veterans, police officers, firefighters, even civilians with no military experience. They all want to help, Ryan nodded. He had expected this. Humans had always been quick to volunteer when others needed help. It was both their greatest strength and their biggest weakness. Start the selection process. We need people who can adapt quickly, work with alien technology, and fight in environments they've never seen before. Meanwhile, on the moon, the Zephyrians had established a temporary base. Their damaged ship sat in a crater while human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to understand their technology. Dr. Peter Williams, Earth's leading aerospace engineer, stood inside the alien ship feeling amazed and confused. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed, but it was also completely different from human engineering. The power source is something we've never seen, he explained to Admiral Carter over a video link. It seems to use some kind of crystal matrix that converts matter directly into energy, but the weapon systems are surprisingly weak. Weak how? Admiral Carter asked. They're designed to disable rather than destroy. The Zephyrians have never developed weapons meant to kill efficiently. Their entire military doctrine is based on defense and deterrence. This was becoming a pattern. As more humans worked with the aliens, they discovered that the peaceful species had never learned to fight the way humans did. They had weapons, but they were designed to stop attacks, not to completely destroy enemies. Ambassador Kethvel watched the humans work with fascination and growing horror. He had studied human history, but seeing their military minds at work was different. Every human he met seemed to instinctively understand warfare in ways that took his people decades to learn. Your species thinks about war very differently, he told Dr. Lisa Hamilton as they walked through the lunar base. How so? Lisa asked. When my people design weapons, we think about how to stop an enemy with minimum harm. When your people design weapons, you think about how to win completely. Lisa felt uncomfortable with the observation, but she knew it was true. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had learned to be very good at it. Back on Earth, the selection process for the expeditionary force had begun. The candidates came from every branch of the military and every walk of life. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, a naval officer who specialized in strategic planning. Alex had spent his career studying how to fight wars that seemed impossible to win. He had read about every major battle in human history, looking for patterns and tactics that could be applied to new situations. The idea of fighting in space against an alien empire was the ultimate challenge. Tell me about your experience with asymmetric warfare, Colonel Brooks said during Alex's interview. I've studied every case where a smaller force defeated a larger one, Alex replied. The key is always to avoid fighting the enemy's kind of battle. You have to make them fight your kind of battle instead. And how would you fight an empire that has conquered 300 worlds? Alex thought for a moment. I wouldn't try to match their fleet strength. I would hit their supply lines, their communication networks, their command structure. Make them fight 100 small battles instead of one big one. Colonel Brooks made a note in Alex's file. This was the kind of thinking they needed. The medical team was also being assembled. Dr. Amy Johnson, a combat medic who had served in disaster zones around the world, was selected to lead the medical corps. She had experience treating injuries that most doctors never saw, and she could work in conditions that would paralyze others. The aliens have advanced medical technology, she explained to her team, but they've never dealt with the kind of trauma that comes from real combat. They don't understand how much damage a human body can take and still keep fighting. As the selection process continued, the cultural exchange between humans and aliens deepened. The Zephyrians were learning about human history, and what they discovered disturbed them greatly. Your species has been at war for its entire existence, Kethvel said to Captain Morrison during one of their daily meetings. How do you live with such violence? Jake thought about the question carefully. We don't think of it as violence for its own sake. We think of it as protecting what we care about. Every war we fought has been about defending our families, our homes, our way of life. But the cost, the alien replied. So many deaths, So much destruction. That's why we fight so hard, Jake said. We know what war really costs. We know what we're risking. That's why we try to end wars quickly and completely. The alien's crystal skin flickered with colors that Jake had learned meant confusion and fear. This is why we need you. But it is also why we are afraid of you. Training began in earnest. The first group of human volunteers was taken to the lunar base to begin working with alien technology. The process was unlike anything they had expected. The aliens had developed enhancement procedures that could improve human reflexes, strength, and endurance. But the process was painful and not all humans could survive it. The volunteers knew the risks, but they accepted them anyway. Sergeant Kelly Davis was among the first to undergo the enhancement. She lay on an alien medical table while crystalline devices attached to her body. The pain was intense, but she had experienced worse during her military service. How do you tolerate this? The alien medic asked. Most species require sedation for even minor procedures. We're used to pain, Kelly replied through gritted teeth. We've learned to work through it. The enhancement process revealed something that amazed the aliens. Humans didn't just tolerate pain better than other species. They could actually use pain to focus their minds and increase their determination. As the weeks passed, more disturbing news arrived from Zephyria in space. Long-range sensors had detected the Vorthan fleet moving toward the outer rim of the Alliance territory. The final assault was beginning. The enemy fleet was massive. Over 200 ships, each one larger than anything in the human arsenal. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced real resistance. War leader Vex Moore commanded the Vorthan advance force from his flagship. He had conquered dozens of systems and never lost a battle. The reports about the new allies joining the resistance meant nothing to him. What could one more species do against the might of the Vorthan Empire? On Earth, Admiral Carter received the intelligence reports with growing concern. The enemy force was larger than anything they had prepared for. But he also knew that the human expeditionary force was almost ready. How many volunteers do we have? He asked Colonel Brooks. 12,000 in the first wave, sir. All enhanced with alien technology, all trained in space combat. They're ready to deploy. Carter looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching enemy fleet and our fleet. 50 ships with hybrid human-alien technology. Not enough to match the Vorthans in direct combat, but enough to make them pay for every system they take. The final preparations were made quickly. The human volunteers said goodbye to their families, knowing they might never return. But they also knew they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. The alien ships that would carry them to war were unlike anything humans had ever seen. But the weapons they carried were distinctly human. Nuclear missiles, kinetic bombardment systems, and close combat weapons that the peaceful aliens had never imagined. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Ambassador Kethvel made one final plea to Admiral Carter. Are you certain about this decision? Once you enter this war, there will be no turning back. The Vorthans will not forget that humans opposed them. Carter looked at the alien with steely determination. That's fine with us. We don't forget either. The human fleet departed Earth's solar system, carrying 12,000 volunteers into the unknown. Behind them, Earth's factories worked around the clock to build more ships. More weapons, more equipment for the war they all knew was coming. The Deathworld had awakened, and its children were going to war. The human fleet arrived at the edge of Zephyrian space just as the first explosions lit up the darkness. The Vorthan advance guard was already attacking the outer defense stations, their massive ships firing energy beams that tore through alien defenses like paper. Commander Sarah Mitchell sat in the cockpit of her modified fighter, watching the battle unfold on her screens. Behind her flew 24 other human pilots, each one handpicked for their skill and courage. They had trained for months, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were seeing. Command, this is Strike Leader Mitchell, she spoke into her radio. We have visual on the enemy fleet. They're bigger than the intelligence report suggested. The voice of Admiral Carter came through the communication system from the command ship. Understood, Strike Leader. What's your assessment? Sarah studied the tactical display. The Vorthan ships were arranged in a perfect formation, advancing slowly toward the Zephyrian defense platforms. Their movements were precise and coordinated, like a machine that had done this hundreds of times before. They're fighting like they expect easy victory, she reported. No defensive formations, no scouts watching for ambush. They think they're invincible. Then let's prove them wrong, Carter replied. All units, execute attack plan Alpha. The human fleet split into 3 groups. Sarah's fighters moved toward the asteroid field where they could use the rocks for cover. The main battle group, led by Captain Nicole Reed, positioned themselves behind a damaged space station. The third group, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, circled wide to attack the Vorthan supply ships. War-leader Dexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the destruction of another alien defense station. This was his 47th conquest, and it was proceeding exactly as planned. The local species had put up token resistance, but they would surrender soon. War Leader, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting new ships entering the system. Unknown configuration? Dexmore looked at the display with mild interest. Reinforcements from one of their allied worlds. How many? 50 ships, sir? Small compared to our fleet. Destroy them quickly. I want this system secured before the next rotation. The Vorthan commander had no idea that he was about to face something completely new in galactic warfare. The peaceful species of the Alliance had always fought defensively, trying to minimize casualties on both sides. Humans had a different approach. Sarah's fighter squadron entered the asteroid field at full speed. The rocks provided perfect cover. For the kind of hit-and-run tactics humans had perfected over centuries of warfare. Her pilots spread out, using the asteroids to hide from Vorthan sensors. Ghost 2, this is Strike Leader, she called to Lieutenant Danny Cooper. You see that command ship? I see it, Strike Leader. Big target. Too big to miss. Let's show them what Earth pilots can do. The human fighters struck like lightning from the asteroid field. Their weapons were different from anything the Vorthans had faced before. Instead of energy beams designed to disable, they fired kinetic projectiles and nuclear missiles designed to destroy completely, the first Vorthan. Ship to die was a heavy cruiser that never saw the attack coming. Sarah's squadron hit it with coordinated strikes that tore through its hull and detonated its power core. The explosion was so massive that it damaged 2 other ships nearby. What was that? Dexmore demanded as his bridge shook from the shock. Wave, unknown weapon type, sir. The small ships are using some kind of explosive projectile. Impossible. No civilized species uses such primitive weapons. But the attacks were just beginning. Captain Reed's battle group emerged from behind the space station, firing everything they had at the Vorthan formation. The human ships were smaller and faster than the enemy vessels, but their weapons hit much harder. The Vorthans tried to respond with their standard tactics, but the humans refused to fight the way galactic warfare was supposed to work. Instead of formal battle lines, they used chaos and surprise. Instead of trying to disable enemy ships, they destroyed them completely. Lieutenant Commander Turner's group struck the Vorthan supply ships at the same time. The enemy had left their logistics vessels unguarded, assuming no one would attack non-combat ships. Turner's forces destroyed 6 supply vessels in the first 5 minutes of battle. Sir, we're losing ships faster than projected, the Vorthan tactical officer reported. The enemy is using unknown tactics. Dexmore studied the tactical display with growing concern. His fleet was still larger than the attacking force, but he was losing ships at a rate that made no sense. The small human fleet was fighting like every ship was willing to die to destroy just one Vorthan vessel. All ships, focus fire on the largest enemy vessel, he ordered. Destroy their command ship. The Vorthans turned their attention to Admiral Carter's flagship, concentrating their fire on the human command vessel. The ship's alien shields held for several minutes, but the combined firepower of dozens of enemy ships was too much. Admiral, shields are failing, the tactical officer reported. Hull breach on decks 5 through 7. Carter looked at the damage reports with calm determination. all non-essential personnel to escape pods. Damage control teams seal those breaches, but the human response was not what the Vorthons expected. Instead of retreating to save their command ship, the human fleet attacked even more aggressively. Sarah's fighters abandoned all defensive tactics and went straight for the Vorthon flagship. "Strike leader, what are you doing?" Carter called over the radio. "That ship has too much firepower." "Sir, if we take out their command ship, the rest of their fleet will be confused," Sarah replied. "Worth the risk." "Sarah, that's a suicide run." "Maybe, sir, but it's the right move." Sarah's squadron dove toward the massive Vorthon flagship, dodging energy beams and missile fire. 3 of her pilots were shot down in the first minute, but the rest kept coming. They fired everything they had at the ship's bridge and command center. The attack succeeded, but at a terrible cost. Sarah's fighter was caught in the explosion as the Vorthon bridge was destroyed. Her last transmission was simple: target destroyed. "Good luck, everyone." The loss of their command ship threw the Vorthon fleet into chaos. They had never faced an enemy willing to trade their lives for tactical advantage. The concept of deliberate sacrifice was completely foreign to their way of thinking. Dr. Amy Johnson worked frantically in the medical bay of the human command ship, treating casualties from multiple species. The Zephyrians and other allied species had joined the battle, inspired by the human example. But they were not prepared for the kind of injuries that came from real combat. "Doctor, we have 17 casualties from the fighter wing," a medic reported. "Several are critical." Amy looked at the injured pilots and saw something that amazed her. Despite their wounds, they were all asking the same question: when could they return to battle? The human willingness to continue fighting while injured was something the alien medical staff had never seen. "Get me surgical equipment," she ordered. "And find me some of that alien healing technology. We're going to try something new." Amy began combining human emergency medicine with alien healing devices. The result was faster healing than anyone had thought possible. Within hours, pilots who should have been in the hospital for weeks were back in their cockpits. The battle continued for 3 days. The human tactics gradually spread to the Allied forces, who began to understand that survival sometimes required embracing violence. The peaceful species learned to fight with human determination while keeping their own technological advantages. War leader Dexmore found himself in a situation he had never experienced before. His fleet was still larger than the enemy force, but he was losing ships steadily. Worse, the enemy showed no signs of retreating or surrendering. "Sir, we've lost 30% of our advance force," his remaining tactical officer reported. "The enemy is using ramming attacks and suicide runs. They're fighting like they're insane." Dexmore studied the tactical display with growing unease. "What are these creatures?" "Intelligence reports call them humans, sir." "They're from a world called Earth. I've never heard of them." "Neither had anyone else, sir. They're new to galactic warfare." The Vorthon commander made a decision that would change the course of the war. Instead of continuing the assault, he ordered his fleet to retreat. For the first time in decades, a Vorthon force withdrew from a battle they could have won. "Sir, we still outnumber them," his officer protested. "Numbers don't matter if the enemy is willing to die for every small victory," Dexmore replied. "We need to understand what we're facing before we continue." The human fleet watched in amazement as the Vorthon ships turned and left the system. They had won their first battle, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of his damaged ship, looking at the casualty reports. They had lost 12 ships and over 300 people, but they had also proved that the Vorthons could be defeated. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them we need more ships, more weapons, and more volunteers. This war is going to be bigger than anyone imagined." The battle at the edge of Zephyrian space became known as the First Victory. News of the human success spread throughout the Alliance, giving hope to species that had never believed they could resist the Vorthon Empire. The war had spread across 12 star systems in just 6 months. The Vorthons, stung by their first defeat, had committed their full military might to crushing the Alliance. But the humans had changed everything about how the war was being fought. General. Kate Harrison stood in the command center of Proxima Station, studying the tactical displays that showed battles raging across multiple systems. She had been promoted to command all human forces after Admiral Carter was injured in the Battle of Wolf 359. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. General, we're receiving reports from the Kepler system, Lieutenant Danny Cooper said. The Vorthons have broken through the outer defenses. Kate looked at the display showing the Kepler system. 3 million civilians lived on the planets there, mostly refugees from worlds the Vorthons had already destroyed. If the system fell, those people would face slavery or death. What forces do we have available? She asked. The 3rd Fleet is engaged at Alpha Centauri. The 7th Fleet is protecting the supply routes. We could pull ships from the defensive grid, but that would leave other systems vulnerable. Kate studied the options. Every decision meant choosing who lived and who died. It was the kind of choice that would have paralyzed the peaceful Alliance species. But humans had learned to make such decisions throughout their history. Send the reserve squadrons from Earth. Strip the lunar defense grid if necessary. We don't abandon civilians. The decision reflected human military doctrine that the Vorthons still didn't understand. Humans would take enormous risks to protect non-combatants, even when it made no tactical sense. This willingness to sacrifice military advantage for moral reasons confused the enemy and inspired the Alliance on the other side of the galaxy. War leader Vex Moore was learning the same lesson at Proxima Station. The massive civilian habitat housed 3 million refugees, making it the largest population center in Alliance space. Taking it would cripple enemy morale and provide millions of slaves for the Vorthon Empire. Sir, we have the station surrounded. His tactical officer reported. Our forces outnumber the defenders 5-1. They cannot escape. Vex Moore looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. This would be the victory that restored his reputation after the embarrassing defeat. At the first battle, the humans could not use their hit-and-run tactics to defend a stationary target with civilians aboard. Send the surrender demand, he ordered. Standard terms. Unconditional surrender or we destroy the station. The message was transmitted to Proxima Station, where Commodore Jake Morrison received it in the command center. He had been promoted after his excellent work during the first contact with the aliens. Now he commanded the defense of the most important target in Alliance space. Sir, the Vorthons are demanding surrender, his communications officer reported. They're giving us 6 hours to decide. Jake looked around the command center at his mixed human and alien staff. The Zephyrians looked terrified. The other Alliance species were calculating odds and finding them hopeless. But the humans were already planning their defense. Send a reply? Jake said calmly. Tell them we need to discuss it with our governments. Sir, what are you really planning? Asked Commander Lisa Park. His chief tactical officer, Jake, activated a secure channel that connected him to the human fleet commanders throughout the system. This is Commodore Morrison. I need all ships to prepare for a close-quarters defense of the station. We're going to make them fight for every corridor. The Vorthons had expected either immediate surrender or a hopeless last stand. What they got was something completely different. The humans began converting civilian ships into weapons platforms, turning cargo haulers into missile boats and passenger liners into electronic warfare vessels. Dr. Peter Williams, now serving as chief engineer for the defense, worked with his team to modify the station's systems. They turned life support ducts into defensive positions, converted maintenance tunnels into ambush points, and rigged the power grid to create electromagnetic traps. Doctor, these modifications will make the station uninhabitable if we lose, a Zephyrian engineer warned. Then we don't lose, Peter replied simply. The siege began 3 days later when the Vorthons grew tired of waiting for surrender. Their ships moved in slowly, expecting token resistance before the inevitable capitulation. What they found was the most determined defense in galactic history. The first wave of Vorthon ships encountered defensive fire unlike anything they had seen before. The converted civilian vessels fought with the desperation of people protecting Their families, cargo ships rammed Vorthan cruisers. Passenger liners used their communication arrays to jam enemy targeting systems. Lieutenant Kelly Davis led the ground defense inside the station itself. Her troops were a mix of human Marines and alien volunteers who had learned human fighting techniques. They had prepared for urban warfare in the station's corridors and maintenance areas. "Remember, we're not trying to win," she told her troops over the radio. "We're trying to make them pay for every meter they take. Make it cost them so much that they decide this place isn't worth it." The Vorthans landed assault troops on the station's outer hull, cutting through the armor with energy weapons. But once inside, they found themselves in a nightmare of narrow corridors and hidden defensive positions. Every door could hide an ambush. Every intersection could be a trap. The fighting was brutal and personal. The Vorthans had experience with space battles and planetary bombardment, but they had never fought corridor to corridor against enemies who knew the terrain perfectly. The humans had learned this kind of warfare in the ruins of Earth cities during their own wars. "Sir, our assault troops are taking heavy casualties," the Vorthan tactical officer reported. "The enemy is using explosive devices hidden in the walls. They're fighting from positions we can't see." Vex Moore studied the reports with growing frustration. His forces were winning, but slowly and at enormous cost. Every section of the station cost him dozens of troops. At this rate, he would lose more soldiers taking one station than he had lost conquering entire worlds. The defense continued for 2 weeks. The humans rotated their troops in shifts, fighting continuously while the aliens took breaks to eat and sleep. The Vorthans discovered that humans could fight for longer periods than any other species they had encountered. Dr. Amy Johnson treated casualties in field hospitals set up throughout the station. She worked alongside alien medics, teaching them techniques for treating combat wounds that their peaceful species had never needed to learn. "Doctor, how do they keep fighting with such injuries?" a Zephyrian medic asked, watching a human soldier with a broken arm return to his position. "They understand what happens if they stop," Amy replied. "Fear of losing is stronger than fear of pain." The psychological warfare began in the second week. The Vorthans broadcast footage of their previous conquests, showing the fate of worlds that had resisted too long. The tactic had always worked before, breaking enemy morale and leading to quick surrender. With humans, it had the opposite effect. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, now serving as psychological warfare officer, prepared the Alliance response. He gathered footage from human history, images of every time humans had fought against impossible odds and won. "Let me tell you about humans," Turner said in his broadcast to the Vorthan fleet. "We've survived ice ages that killed most life on our planet. We fought wars that lasted for decades. We've rebuilt from disasters that would have destroyed other species. You think you can break us by showing us death and destruction? We've seen worse and survived it." The broadcast became famous throughout the galaxy. It was the first time anyone had responded to Vorthan psychological warfare with defiance instead of fear. The turning point came when a human strike force, led by Captain Nicole Reed, infiltrated the Vorthan command ship. They used maintenance shafts and service corridors that the enemy had never thought to guard. The route took them through sections of the ship that were flooded with radiation that would have killed most species. "Command, this is Reed," she reported over a crackling radio. "We're in position near the enemy bridge, beginning assault." The fight inside the Vorthan flagship was vicious and close quarters. The humans used weapons and tactics that the peaceful galactic species had never developed. They fought with knives, explosives, and determination that terrified the enemy. Captain Reed and her team succeeded in their mission, but only half of them survived the assault. The Vorthan command ship was crippled, its navigation and communication systems destroyed, but the cost was enormous. "This is Reed," came her final transmission. "Target destroyed. Tell Earth we held the line." The loss of their command ship broke the Vorthan assault. Without central coordination, their fleet began to withdraw from the station. They had technically won the battle, controlling most of the station's outer sections, But the cost had been too high. War-leader Vexmore looked at his casualty reports with shock. He had lost more soldiers taking one space station than in his previous 10 conquests combined. The humans had turned a simple siege into a grinding war of attrition. "Sir, we control 70% of the station," his tactical officer reported. "But our assault troops are exhausted. Morale is at critical levels." Vexmore made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. The final battle began at the Nexus of Stars, a massive gravitational anomaly that served as the main hyperspace junction for the entire galaxy. Control of the Nexus meant control of interstellar travel throughout the region. Both sides knew that whoever won here would win the war. War leader Vexmore stood on the bridge of his new flagship, watching the largest fleet in Vorthen history assemble around the Nexus. Over 1,000 ships filled the space around the gravitational anomaly, each one carrying weapons that could destroy entire cities. This time there would be no retreat. "Sir, all fleet elements are in position," his tactical officer reported. "We have confirmed kills on the human advance scouts." "They know we're here." Vexmore studied the tactical display with grim satisfaction. He had learned from his previous encounters with the humans. This time, he had brought enough force to overwhelm even their suicidal tactics. There would be no clever ambush or hit-and-run attacks. This would be pure destruction. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "We end this today, no survivors." On the other side of the Nexus, Admiral Ben Carter watched the enemy fleet through the viewscreen of his flagship. The human force was outnumbered 10-1, but they were not alone. Every surviving species in the Alliance had sent their remaining ships to this final battle. "Admiral, final count shows we have 120 ships," Colonel Ryan Brooks reported. "Not enough to match them ship for ship," Carter nodded. He had expected this. The humans had always been outnumbered in this war. But they had something the Vorthens didn't understand: the willingness to sacrifice everything for a cause they believed in. "Send the message to all ships," Carter ordered, human and alien crews alike. "Today we fight not just for our own survival, but for every free world in the galaxy. Make every shot count." The battle began with the largest space engagement in galactic history. The Vorthen fleet advanced in perfect formation, their energy weapons creating a wall of destruction that lit up space like a new star. The Alliance fleet responded with everything they had: human kinetic weapons, Zephyrian particle beams, and technologies from a dozen different species. Commander Lisa Park led the fighter engagement from her cockpit, coordinating attacks from 15 different species. The aliens had learned human tactics over the months of war, but they brought their own advantages: sensors that could see through any deception, weapons that never missed their targets, and computers that could calculate impossible intercept courses. "All fighters, execute attack pattern Delta," she ordered. "Remember, we're not trying to win a dogfight. We're trying to clear a path for the bomber squadrons." The fighter battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human pilots fought with desperate courage while alien pilots provided precision and technical skill. Together they created holes in the Vorthen formation that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Danny Cooper, now a squadron leader, dove his fighter toward a Vorthen battleship that was 10 times larger than his small craft. Behind him flew pilots from 6 different worlds, all following human tactics that their own species had never developed. "Blue Squadron, follow me in," he called over the radio. "We're going to show them what we learned at Proxima Station." The fighters struck the battleship's hangar bay, penetrating deep inside the enemy vessel before detonating their nuclear warheads. The explosion tore the massive ship apart from the inside, something the Vorthens had never seen before, but the real battle was happening on the Nexus station itself. Both fleets were fighting to control the facility that regulated hyperspace travel for the entire region. The Vorthens had landed assault troops, while the Alliance forces tried to hold the critical control centers. Colonel Brooks led the ground battle from the station's command center, coordinating troops from multiple species in the kind of close-quarters fighting that humans had perfected. The alien soldiers had learned to fight with human determination while keeping their own technological advantages. All units, the enemy is trying to reach the main control room, he reported over the tactical network. If they take it, they can shut down hyperspace travel for the entire galaxy. We hold here no matter what. The fighting in the station corridors was brutal and desperate. The Vorthans had brought their best assault troops, soldiers who had conquered hundreds of worlds. But they faced defenders who had learned that some things were worth dying for. Dr. Amy Johnson worked in a field hospital set up in the station's medical center, treating casualties from the ground battle. The wounds were terrible, but she had learned to perform miracles with a combination of human medicine and alien healing technology. "Doctor, we have incoming casualties from Section 7, a medic reported. Multiple species, all critical." Amy looked at the injured soldiers, humans, Zephyrians, and species she had never seen before, all fighting together against a common enemy. "Get them to surgery immediately. Save everyone you can." The climax came when long-range sensors detected something that chilled everyone who saw it. The Vorthans had brought their ultimate weapon, a device that could collapse the Nexus itself, destroying hyperspace travel for the entire galaxy. "Sir, if they activate that weapon, it will cut off interstellar travel for thousands of years," the Alliance science officer reported to Admiral Carter. "Entire civilizations will be isolated." Carter studied the readings with growing horror. The Vorthans were willing to destroy galactic civilization rather than face defeat. It was the ultimate act of spite from an empire that had never learned to lose. "Can we stop it?" he asked. "Only by getting a team inside their command ship and destroying the weapon directly." "But sir, it would be a suicide mission. The radiation levels alone would kill most species." Carter looked around his bridge at the mixed human and alien crew. He saw the same determination in every face, whether human or alien. The war had changed everyone who fought in it. "I need volunteers for a final mission," he announced over the ship's communication system. "High radiation, no chance of survival, but it's the only way to save the galaxy." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of volunteers from every species came forward. But in the end, it was Dr. Amy Johnson who led the final mission, along with a mixed crew of humans and aliens who had fought together throughout the war. "Command, this is Johnson," came her voice over the radio as their ship approached the Vorthan weapon platform. "We're going in. Tell Earth and all the Alliance worlds that we held the line to the end." The final assault was everything the war had been: desperate courage, impossible odds, and people willing to sacrifice everything for others they had never met. The volunteer crew fought their way through the Vorthan ship, facing defenses that killed most of them. Before they reached their target, Dr. Johnson and the three survivors reached the weapon just as the Vorthans were preparing to activate it. The device was massive, a crystalline structure that bent space and time around itself. Destroying it would require detonating their ship's reactor core while they were still aboard. "This is Johnson, final transmission," came her voice, calm and clear despite the chaos around her. "For every world that lives free, for every child that will see tomorrow, we hold the line. Detonating now." The explosion was visible across the entire Nexus system. The Vorthan ultimate weapon was destroyed, but so was the ship and crew that had saved the galaxy. The sacrifice was complete, but the victory was total. With their ultimate weapon gone and their fleet broken by the Alliance counterattack, the Vorthans finally understood what they faced. They were fighting an enemy that would never surrender, never negotiate, and never stop fighting for what they believed was right. War leader Thexmore looked at his tactical display and saw his 1,000-ship fleet reduced to scattered remnants. The humans and their allies had done the impossible. They had broken the Vorthan Empire. "Signal all remaining ships," he ordered quietly. "Full retreat, send word to the Empire. We have found an enemy we cannot defeat." The Battle of the Nexus ended with complete victory for the Alliance, but at enormous cost. The human casualty lists filled entire databases. Entire squadrons had been lost. But they had saved not just their own species, but every free civilization In the galaxy. Ambassador Kethvel stood in the rebuilt Alliance Council chambers, looking out at representatives from dozens of worlds. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The peaceful species had learned that sometimes violence was the only answer to evil. "We came to Earth seeking warriors," he said in his speech to the memorial service. "We found heroes. We begged for help and received salvation. The Deathworlders have shown us that freedom is worth any price." In the years that followed, human ships patrolled the peaceful galaxy, crewed by volunteers who understood that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's protectors, and they stood ready for whatever threats the universe might bring. New monitoring stations detected signals from distant galaxies, other empires, other threats, other civilizations in need of help. The response was immediate and unanimous. Humanity would answer the call. The Deathworlders' work was never done. The galaxy was free, and it would stay that way as long as humans were willing to fight for it.